Hi there, my name is Daisy Rutter, and for my communications presentation, I will be discussing the topic of development of abortion in Canada, a fundamental of women's rights. So to begin, I would like to issue a content advisory warning since while abortion rights is an important topic to discuss, I do understand that it is a sensitive issue and that it impacts everyone differently. Before we proceed, I would like the audience to understand that I have developed my ideas based on research which investigates the status of women's rights in Canada and critically analyzes how the existence of abortion protects both the freedom and safety of women. I hope that by opening the discussion, we can deepen our understanding of how the availability of abortion supports women throughout Canada. So I would like to explore the historical significance of abortion in Canada. In 1969, the Liberal government permitted abortion under certain circumstances. Abortions were to be provided only in a hospital if a committee of doctors decided that continuing the pregnancy might endanger the woman's life or health. In 1982, Canada then enacted the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Any law found contravening those rights could be struck down as unconstitutional. In 1988, the Supreme Court of Canada struck down Canada's abortion law as unconstitutional. The law was found to violate Section 7 of Charter of Rights and Freedoms because it infringed upon a woman's right to life, liberty, and security of person. And so my presentation is guided by the research question: is it the responsibility of the Canadian government to protect the ability for women to access safe abortion procedures as well as bodily autonomy within Canada? And so my discussion is going to be divided into three main points. The first being, the moral debate of abortion is irrelevant to the necessity of accessible abortion. Second, safe access to abortion protects the rights and lives of women, such as it decreases mortality, encourages safe contraception, and emphasizes bodily autonomy. And third, addressing barriers that prevent the availability of abortion will further improve reproductive health care. And so my thesis, which responds to the guiding question, is access to universal healthcare is a core component of women's rights, and therefore the government must act to protect abortion rights and support bodily autonomy throughout Canadian healthcare. And so on to my first point within the presentation. Why is the moral debate of abortion irrelevant to the necessity of abortion? Well, the main conflict between the moral debate of abortion and abortion rights is that anti-choice activists often disregard the freedom for women to make their own choice that is based on their individual values and beliefs. While everyone is entitled to their own opinion, it should never infringe on another's right to affirm their bodily autonomy, as it would contradict the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. For example, the Supreme Court stated in Dobson v. Dobson that the physical unity of a woman and her fetus precludes the imposition of a duty of care on her, because that would be a profound compromise of her privacy and autonomy. Furthermore, relating a fetus to when human life begins is ultimately a philosophical discussion rather than determining scientific fact, and thus is why the moral debate of abortion is irrelevant to the necessity of abortion. In addition, the founder of the Abortion Rights Coalition of Canada, Joyce Arthur, responds to anti-abortionist claims by stating, "Women's lives, health, and basic human rights depend on the availability of abortion, and those are the only factors necessary to justify abortion," clearly demonstrating that providing abortion is a necessity of reproductive health care. It can then be identified that the Canadian government is responsible for maintaining and improving universal reproductive health care in Canada, since the existence of accessible abortion is an essential to women's rights. On to my second point, how does safe access to abortion protect the rights and lives of women? The availability of abortion protects the lives of women through decreasing mortality. According to reports from World Health Organization, almost half of the 56 million abortions in the world each year are unsafe and generally illegal. As a result, at least 22,800 women die every year and 7 million are admitted to hospitals with complications. About 8% of maternal mortality is due to unsafe abortion. These statistics highlight the danger that illegal abortion presents to the lives of women, especially since the data is sourced to illegal activity in countries where extremely restrictive abortion laws exist. then there are potentially higher fatalities than what may be reported. So you can see on the diagram on the left that in countries where the strictest abortion laws exist, there is also the highest rates of unsafe abortions, which in turn do result in maternal mortality. It is also discussed in the conclusion of a 2012 study from Without Apology, Writings on Abortion in Canada, that unattended pregnancies occur in all societies, and some women who are determined to avoid an unplanned birth will resort to unsafe abortions if safe abortions are not readily available, and some will suffer complications as a result, and some will die. Surprising results after abortions had been liberalized in Canada disclosed that abortion rates have lowered following legislation. It was reported most recently from the Canadian Institute for Health Information that since 1997 there has been a 12% decline in abortions across Canada, and furthermore, out of 1,000 women of childbearing age, only 13.1 had an abortion in 2017. Therefore, it is understood that the Canadian government must ensure that accessible abortion is available to all, to effectively protect the safety of women in reproductive health care. And finally, on to my third point, addressing barriers that prevent the availability of abortion. Existing barriers between women across Canada have prevented equal access to abortion and continue to leave women in vulnerable positions without reproductive health care options they are entitled to. Differences between provincial regulation, local awareness, and even discrimination has created inequity in abortion resources for women. The Director of Health Promotion at Action Canada for Sexual Health and Rights points out that people often conflate the two, thinking that because it's decriminalized, it's very easy to access in our country, and it's not the case. Here there's been very little progress done to make sure that abortion is actually, in fact, accessible to everyone in Canada equally. A factor in pregnancy differing between provinces that often inhibits the access to abortion is the gestational limit, which is the number of weeks that may pass into pregnancy until abortion is prohibited. Rachel Johnstone and Emmett McFarlane's article on abortion policy explained the process as gestational age which abortions are available in each province is not limited to the law, but rather the discretion of physicians, often influenced by the extent of their training, funding regulations, and the availability of facilities. In addition, certain provinces will only financially cover surgical abortions performed in hospitals, while abortion clinics are not covered, which directly impacts marginalized populations who may not have local access to abortion providers due to location or available coverage between provinces. Consequently, the way Canada operates when delivering abortion to patients is divided, and only further proves that unequal access to abortion continues to be a hindrance for women seeking reproductive health care. It is of utmost importance that the Canadian government resolves these persisting issues and continues to advocate for women's rights within healthcare to establish. We will now move on to responding to some counter-arguments. The first issue is that pro-life activists disagree with allowing abortion. These views are almost always sparked by religious beliefs, patriarchal law, or societal pressures to serve the purpose of becoming a mother as a woman. My response is, if society is guided by the rights and freedoms that every individual is entitled to, there is no question that a woman deserves to be able to choose the way she shapes her life and decide what motherhood means to her. An expert from a previously radical pro-life woman explains how her perspective on abortion shifted as she grew into an adult. As she states, in the same way that women should be able to choose such parts of their lives as their life partners and their jobs, they should also be able to choose whether to have a family. If we believe in women's rights such as the right to vote and the right to work, we must also believe in women's rights to choose their reproductive futures. The second issue is that some may believe the misconception that since Canada has decriminalized abortion, it is a procedure that is conveniently available to women and is fully embraced by the Canadian government. My response is that, unfortunately, according to my research, this is false, as women continue to struggle with barriers preventing abortion, whether it's the lack of clinics that offer abortion procedures, or individual provinces inhibiting abortion for all women through conflicting regulations with other provinces. The difficulty that women endure is expressed through Rachel Johnstone and Emmett McFarlane's article on abortion policy. when it is determined that treating R versus Morgan Taylor as though it resolved the issue of abortion in Canada neglects the realities of access for women across the country. The barriers imposed by many of the provinces, either through choice or inaction, continue to restrict access to abortion services in many parts of the country. So why does abortion in Canada remain to be a focus of women's rights? Despite the liberalization of abortion in Canada, unequal access to abortion continues to impact women's reproductive health care. Differing regulations across provinces and the lack of available locations that offer abortion as a medical procedure indicate that the Canadian government has not been effectively protecting women's reproductive rights. If Canada embraces women's rights, then the government must act to ensure that access to universal health care is available to all women. How do we improve reproductive health care in Canada? Well, the Canadian government must be held accountable to protect access to abortion across Canada. I also believe that universal access to reproductive health care in Canada begins with improving the availability of clinics that offer abortion, ending stigmas that are associated with abortion, and furthering research into improving women's health care with the goal of erasing sexism in medical practices. Furthermore, a focus of improving women's health care includes ending dismissiveness in diagnosing a female patient's condition, such as endometriosis or other complications which lead to future issues in a woman's reproductive health care. In conclusion, as women continue to advocate for their freedoms, defending reproductive rights will always be a focus for Canada's constant discussion on abortion. With inequality of available clinics and medical coverage across provinces, it is understood that women's reproductive rights in Canada require improvement and further protection under the Canadian government, especially since accessible, safe abortion protects the mortality, health, and overall freedom of women. It should be accepted as a necessity to healthcare in order to secure reproductive rights. Therefore, it is of the Canadian government's responsibility to see that these needs are met through accessibility and awareness to ensure the protection of women's rights. All right, and that finishes off my presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope that this presentation has evoked some further thought about abortions and women's rights. Thank you so much.